Good evening, Jupiter Station. TJ Yesnak here, your host. Tonight, our special guest is Stephanie Czajkowski. I certainly hope I got that pronunciation right. Um, she is a star of Star Trek Picard Season 3. She also plays Hammerhead on Doom Patrol on the Max app. Uh, you'll probably see her on HBO in that role. Um, she's also a breast cancer survivor and advocate, and we're really honored to have her on the show tonight. So let's, without further ado, bring on Steph Czajkowski.
Hey,
Hi,
it's good to
Steph.
see you again.
How's it going?
It goes. It's a little rainy here, but I mean, we're so not used to weather in Los Angeles that I'm like, what's happening?
It's like New England. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change.
Exactly. How are you doing?
Hey, I am outstanding. Thank you for
Good.
joining us tonight. I super appreciate
Oh,
this.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
As I said, you were on season 3 of Picard
Yes.
until that horrible, horrible changeling did that thing. Ooh.
I know, right? I know.
So for people who might not be familiar with you, could you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. How deep do you want me to go? I'm
Um, we can touch on the professional if you want to maybe touch on the cancer survivorship. That would be great too.
Oh, sure. I originally hail from Wisconsin. I grew up in southern Wisconsin in a town called Racine. I'd always wanted to be an actor. Ever since I saw the Brady Bunch when I was 5, I made my mom write a letter to the affiliate station to see if I could be on the Brady Bunch. They said no because it's been off the air for several decades, but go to acting school. Which took me to New York City. I went to NYU and I went to Tisch School of the Arts to be in musical theater and to do off Broadway theater, which I did some of, but also found that I was 5'10" and my stature was rather tall for theater and film, frankly. And so I ended up coming to LA and started playing a lot of cops and firefighters. Pretty much, I had a running joke for a while that if I was a civil servant, if I had a weapon, I would be cast like a gun, an axe. Like my first bigger role was my first bigger role was in Bones. I played a lumberjill where I threw an axe. Um, and pretty much I just did the thing that most actors do. You just keep auditioning and the roles get a little bit bigger. Um, a semi serendipitous thing happened, I guess, because it ended up leading to Tavine and to Hammerhead. In 2018, I was diagnosed with 3 unrelated cancers. Two of them they just cut out. The third one, the breast cancer, I ended up doing chemo and radiation. And because I knew that I would lose my hair, I decided to just be like, well, whatever, I might as well get headshots. And when my hair started falling out, I shaved it. I got headshots, bald headshots, and a month later, I booked the role of Hammerhead in DC's Doom Patrol. They started out on a streamer called DC Universe, and then gradually moved to HBO Max when the app expanded. I was on 4 seasons of that, and along the way, in between, I was on in 2021. I wrapped Doom Patrol season 3. I ended up going to Albuquerque and shooting. I had grown a little hair back, and I ended up shooting Peacock's MacGruber alongside Will Forte and Kristen Wiig as the right hand heavy to Billy Zane, a character named Bex Dawson, and Kristen Wiig and I have a fight to the death. Not to ruin anything, she wins, which means nothing in MacGruberland. And then I booked the role of Lieutenant Tavine on season 3 of Star Trek Picard.
All right, so let's discuss that. Have you
Sure.
been a Star Trek fan your entire life?
I have been. a Star Trek, I did not know how large of a Star Trek fan I was until I got the job. It has been adjacent to my life. My father was a very, very large Star Trek fan. He watched the original series and then he watched The Next Generation. He was a huge Worf fan. And my mother was a costume maker and seamstress and worked at a party shop and used to make cosplay outfits. When The Voyage Home came out, I helped because yeah, I remember going with her to help do a balloon arch for a premiere event in outside of Chicago for the Voyage Home. And I believe my first movie that I can recall in a theater was Star Trek the movie. So it's been in and around my life for my entire life. And I didn't realize how much a fabric of my life it was until I stepped on that bridge. I just really was like, "Oh my god." So,
It did look pretty cool.
yeah.
So, what was it like working with the original cast of The Next Generation?
When I got cast, I knew it was gonna be a big friggin' deal. Like, I knew it was gonna be a big fucking deal. Um, and, it's intimidating a little bit because you know that you are coming into something that's already established, and you're joining legends who thankfully are the most generous artists in the world. They're all incredibly kind, and that is the lovely thing about being part of the Trek family is once you're in, they just welcome you with open arms. I was at a Comic-Con in Rhode Island in November at Rhode Island Comic Con, and kind of had a reunion a little bit with Gates. I've seen a number of times. Denise, I didn't work with, but I've been at Comic Cons with. I saw LeVar for the first time in since the premiere, I think. But and Brent was walking around and he saw me and he was just like, Stephanie, I'm like, Brent. And we never shot together, but it was just like big hugs, welcome to this world. So I mean, the days were incredibly long because there has to be they want to get the best angles, the best, shots, the best takes to create the best product. But it was really a joy going there every day. It was really a joy.
I can't even imagine how cool that would be.
Oh yeah.
Um, on
Yeah.
a side note, you, I am told, were given a T-shirt when you were at the Comic Con in Rhode Island.
I did. Yeah, I did. I
Awesome.
don't I think I have it folded up and in my special shirts in my closet.
Awesome. Well, that's my fan club chapter president that gave it to you.
Oh,
So
yes. Yeah,
he
it
was
was
kind of
really cool
geeking
seeing
out
that.
this morning when I was talking to
Yeah. Yeah. Had I known I would have pulled it out in time. I'm like, our
him.
room's a little messy right now. I'm just like, "Ugh."
It's all good. Um, so you got to work pretty close with Terry Metalis
Mhm.
and the production staff.
Yeah.
Um, what was it like working with Terry? And did he hint at maybe bringing you back if by some miracle they had a Star Trek legacy?
I think when we decided that I was being assassinated, or not really assassinated, when I was being executed, there was a joke when he was just like, "Well, she could always have a sister." It was the last. I mean, you go into that season knowing it's the last season of that show, and I think he threaded the needle for a potential spinoff certainly. But you don't go in thinking that it's going to be anything more than it is. The one thing I can say about Terry, which I've found in the last couple of shows I've worked on, both with him and other showrunners, is it was a generosity, in particular with Terry, a generosity of spirit that I had not encountered on shows previous to Doom Patrol. Like Doom Patrol was its own thing, but in working on, I'd worked on Grey's Anatomy and things like this, machines that work really fast. And when you're playing technically, whereas I and Jin and Joseph and Ijin and Joseph more so than Ashley are characters that in any other in any other series could very well just be kind of glorified wallpaper a little bit, just because we were part of the bridge crew, but it would be easy to just be like, yeah, yeah, they're just whatever, and not actually kind of craft and give us the opportunity to create a character, even if we didn't have as much screen time, simply because the aim of the show was to talk about Picard, like, as much as I wanted to be the TV show. And so I was, and still am, kind of shocked and honored that I had gotten this role. And then the big decision was, I was bald at the time. I'd shaved my head again. And it was a big decision. Like, it was a decision we had to weigh on whether Tavine was going to be bald or if she was going to have, traditional Vulcan hair. And we tried on Vulcan wigs and they looked terrible on me. They look real bad. Um, but he came down and met me in person and was like, so what do you think? Like, should she be bald? Do we want to be bald? Has there ever been a bald Vulcan? Like, what? And so the background of my character, the bald, and I was like, well, what if, she is part Deltan? Because then the bald, and it's been this long. And he was like, I could see that. He was like, let's make her a quarter Deltan. Let's make her, as opposed to half and half. Let's have a portion of her be Deltan, which doesn't play into, Picard season 3, but as an actor, it gives you a lot more stuff to play with when you're reacting to things. You know what I mean? And it seems to have really connected with a lot of people, which is kind of remarkable. But other showrunners, in my experience, would not take that time. And so, and Terry did that with everybody. So Terry was incredibly inclusive no matter what. So, and that's not always the case.
Well, I gotta say, you did an amazing job on this too. The backstory was nice. And quite honestly, you're giving us a viewpoint to everyone else. I've chatted with him a few times. He's definitely on my bucket list for guests I want to have on eventually.
Yeah.
And now all the strikes are over, I'm sure that that can be a thing. But I definitely got to say, let me see here. As far as advocacy,
Mhm.
you as far as when you the 3 different, or basically like a blog, I would say.
Yeah, I did. I mean, we started with a blog, mostly because I had gone through a long the year previous to me actually being diagnosed. I had lost my father, my uncle, and a good friend of mine from college, my college roommate, like one after the other after the other. And so when I was diagnosed with my first cancer, I was kind of like, okay. But then the second one came up really fast. It came literally, I found a lump in my breast the Saturday before I was supposed to go in for surgery to remove my thyroid. And so it kind of spun me out a little bit. And I found that I went looking for information as to what it meant, because I feel like often we see people who are diagnosed with cancer, and I see this with celebrity too, and that is not, I mean, Star Trek has certainly given me a larger platform, but I would not consider myself a celebrity by any stretch of the imagination. I'm like, but people are really private and they have a right to be about what's going on. But I also feel, as someone who has witnessed my a parent die of cancer, and me going through this thing that breast cancer, that 1 in 8 women in, or 1 in 8, let me requalify, 1 in 8 people with, mammary glands, basically, who are, because you may not identify as a woman or whatever. Um, it afflicts, one of 8 of those people. And so when people are going through it, they tend to be really quiet about it, or it's either life or death. And I was diagnosed pretty early. I was incredibly healthy because I'd been a fitness instructor for years. And so I also just did not have the bandwidth to hide it because I had emotionally, I was carrying so much that so I figured I and my husband sat down and I wrote my side, he wrote his side. There's a lot more on my side than it is his side, as a way to both kind of get it out somewhere and also explain to people without having to tell the story to everybody. Just because there was people to tell, and I didn't want to have to repeat myself over and over again. When the pandemic hit, like a year later, when I was done with most of my treatment, and the pandemic hit, we had the time to be able to kind of, because everything was shut down, we had the time to kind of process as the world was like stuck and couldn't move. It felt really familiar because that's kind of what chemo feels like. So it was an opportunity to kind of process what we had gone through. Because a lot of times in major health issues or in major, people die, all these things, you don't start processing it until you've made it through the major part of it. Like it's when the crisis is over is when all the emotion hits because you're just trying to survive to get through. And so, and no one really tells you that. No one talks about how, if someone dies, you go, you do the funeral. And I always tell people the hardest part is not going through the funeral, having everybody come. The hardest part is the day when that's over. And you have to go back to life, like normal life. And there's that grand absence in your life of that person because everything else keeps you distracted. And with a disease or something, if it's chronic, you're dealing with it all the time. Like, but if you go through what's like this big battle and you get done, you ring the bell maybe, and then you're like, now what? Because everything's changed, but nothing's changed. And so when we went through and looked at it, we found that there wasn't a lot of people talking about how it affects relationships. And so we thought maybe if we went through and kind of threw this out in the world, we called it, the podcast we hope you never have to listen to, because we thought maybe it would just help people a little bit. We thought maybe it would help somebody else who was going through it and kind of felt alone. And since then, I've done I traditionally ride and raise money for rare cancers because my mom had one every year. And I've in the past few years, for the month of October, I will do something like every day of October. I'll do like 30 things you need to know beyond the basic breast cancer machigana, like just stuff we don't talk about because we don't, in the same way that, mental health for a long time has been stigmatized and we're getting better at it. Cancer is viewed pretty binary. It's you survive, you die, but we haven't cured cancer yet, but we're getting a lot better at having people survive chronically with it, and we need to start addressing that as well.
And I completely understand that. My mom is fighting breast cancer right now. My dad is fighting prostate cancer. My stepson is living with a terminal brain tumor, but it's super, super small. So
Yeah.
there's improvement there, but you're absolutely right. The gray area is just something that nobody's ever talked about because, like you said, it's all binary. You see one side or the other. You don't see what goes on in between. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you've taken that opportunity to show the people because I watched those all through October and it was one of those things like, ooh, I wonder what she has today. And it was really informative. And
Well, thank
I
you.
actually
Yeah.
shared it with my mom and it actually made her feel quite a bit better too.
Good. Good. And I think it's just the, it's people don't, I mean, you're sick, you get tired of talking about your own stuff, but at the same time, I loathe Twitter in general, but it's a really good place to connect with Trekkies, and it's also a great place. There's something called Cancer Twitter, and it just hasn't moved to a different platform to have this thing. If it's like literally, there's something called Thanks Cancer, and all these people from around the world who are like da da da, thanks Cancer, and it gets shared, and all these people get to join in, and it is the beauty of the internet in its own right to find people who just understand innately because they've done it. You know what I mean? And if you're new to that, it's hard sometimes to try to explain and or to just to deal with family members who just want you to be okay. And I get that. Like, I mean, how much I communicate with I communicate with my family pretty frequently and I keep them up to date, but like I had a headache, a tension headache that like is something that I get all the time that lasted a little longer, was a little worse. And as somebody who's very healthy, I have to treat it as if potentially it could be metastasized cancer, which is so stupid, but is also smart to do because then you're like, okay, now I go to the emergency room and thankfully I have good health insurance thanks to track. But you got to go take care of it because in my estimation, because that's the other thing, I'm like, the best kind of cancer to have is the cancer you catch just as it starts. Like the best kind of anything to try to find is something before it is spread that you haven't ignored. And we just don't have a healthcare system set up for that. And I'm hoping that is going to change because we really need a restructuring of people being able to afford really good care. We really do.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely something that I discussed with Melinda Snodgrass last week, that a lot of what I have become as an adult has been, by and large, a lot of Star Trek behind it. And I really hope that we get to a point where we have a healthcare system where everybody can be seen, everybody
Yeah.
can have healthcare. I before I was doing my full-time job now, I worked in the medical field, and I would transport people to and from. And I saw a ton of people that they needed healthcare.
Yeah.
And you hear dumb people like Rand Paul, well, that's making the doctor a slave. No, no, no. What you're not understanding here, Mr. Paul, is that yes, in 1776, healthcare was not a right, but we were also dying at 40.
Yeah. If not before, you
You know,
know?
we've moved beyond that, and unfortunately, even today, a lot of people don't realize that we are not the same people we were, you know, 4 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Every day that we're here, our people as a culture expands. And that's something that Star Trek has taught me, is that just because we're somewhere now doesn't mean we can't expand to somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like also, there's before the thing I tell my students, the thing I tell everything is like all things is change is uncomfortable. It just is. Like in all aspects. It's not like I mean sometimes that you change for the better, but like in general, it's usually a little hard. It's a hard to get things going and we are a very very large country and but we're starting to have generations and voices that are like, no, this is ridiculous because like I think of we people should have the right to be healthy and live. Like they shouldn't be scared to go get healthcare because they're going to go bankrupt. Like it's utterly ridiculous. Like I mean, my uncle extensively died because he didn't want to go to the emergency room because he didn't want the expense of going to the emergency room. And he waited until the next day and it was too late. Like, and stuff like that. It's just like, this should not be on anyone's mind. It should be, I'm sick. I need to take care of it, you know?
I mean, is a veteran, so a lot of his cancer treatment is because they found that um, his particular level of prostate cancer has a direct link to his physical contact with orange. Some
Hmm.
brilliant oncologist in Vermont figured this connection out. So my dad was able to get cancer treatment,
Right.
and that's awesome. And my dad swears by the VA health system. I am of two minds about it myself, but
Right.
that's his belief.
Right.
Um, and he said, well, we should go with the VA healthcare system, but only veterans should get it. I'm like, well, hold on. I said, I think everyone needs healthcare because everybody needs to be able to get healthcare when they need it.
Yeah.
And of course, inevitably, my dad's like, well, I don't want to pay for somebody else's bad life choice. And I said, Dad, don't look at it as you're paying for somebody else's horrible life choice. Look at it as you're paying $2 for a year of health care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that somebody else is getting the same health care as you. It matters that you're paying two whole dollars to get $20,000 worth of health care.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you need to look at.
Well, the other thing is it doesn't like that argument of like, I don't want to pay for someone else. You already are. People can't afford it, so you're going to the emergency. Like it's already ending up like, and also who cares? Like I'm just of the mind like that, in that kind of mindset, no offense to your dad, but I'm also just like, that also is like, I want good public schools. I don't have children. My property taxes pay for public schools, fully okay with it. Because
Absolutely.
because a healthier, smarter populace is proven to be a healthier, world to live in. So, but
Right. And I mean, when we were kids, we were learning all sorts of new things with science. And you look at all the stuff we've learned when we were kids,
yeah,
and then now we're hitting the Facebook wall. Like,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
what? What?
yeah.
What did you just say? Like, we have undone 50 years worth of science in the last four.
I don't know if we fully undone because there's still a lot of really crazy, cool shit going on.
True.
And it to the point of, I think a lot of it is the loudest voices. I think like the Facebook phenomenon and everything else is just like, oh my God, we get the most clicks. It's the most like, it's sad that people respond to anger, like it triggers them in it, like, and then it like you feed on it kind of like it's sugar, right? But I was hanging out with a friend of mine yesterday, and her kid is 10. Oh no, he's 9. The kid, he just finished reading, like he's a genius, like he's a genius. He and his friends are crazy, lovely, and kind, and smart, and just he was like, he knows the building of the Titanic, is super interested in science. Like the last book he read, he's a 9-year-old. And she was like, so the book he just finished is Band of Brothers. And now he's reading, like, just there are kids, like, the thing about the internet is bad in a lot of ways, is I think helped offer up just the opportunity for kids who may not have it. Like, I can't believe that what we see the most, which is an algorithm and stuff. I've also stopped like being on the internet as much. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm happier because not that I'm living in my bubble, but also because these social media platforms are designed to feed you what you watch to make money. And as long as you know that, then you think you can only think like it's crazy because if you click on one thing, it'll just keep showing up like other things like it, right? So I think that there is plenty of people who don't believe in science, or I think the pandemic shook a lot of people's, not faith. I think it scared the shit out of them. I think the biggest thing about the pandemic and COVID was suddenly you had everyone having to stop, and they're like, it's just a cold, because the potential thought of dying, having gone through it, is with cancer, is people don't know what to do and everybody reacts differently. And we want to have control over what's going on because it gives us some sense of security, right? And I think it's kind of spun out in that way. And you have these social media platforms that exacerbate that.
I mean, along that line, like when we were kids, we would watch Wesley Crusher on the Enterprise, and he'd do all of his school stuff on the Enterprise. And we thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, oh, look,
Yeah.
he got that little pad thing, which we now have, and he's doing all his schoolwork. We thought, being anywhere in the galaxy and doing schoolwork was the coolest thing. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, I'm the IT guy for my house,
Yeah.
and I've got 5 kids at the table, and they're all on their tablets and their Chromebooks, and they're doing their classwork, and their teachers doing a presentation, and let one of those teachers say um, something that doesn't jive with what we learned in school, and you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Like I had one of my stepkids, his teacher, they were talking about the Civil War, and he said, "Oh, well, the Civil War was all about slavery." I'm like, "Oh, hold on. Yes, that was one component." I said, "But what about states' rights? What about economic development? What about this, that, and the other thing?" And my stepson asked his teacher, "Oh, no, 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 it's all about slavery." It's like, "What?" It's like, "I'm paying taxes for you to teach this? What?"
Well, I think that the loss of nuance, I think you can easier say that our loss of nuance in general um, is lost. It has been lost across the board. So you're just like, okay, what's the biggest, what is the biggest reason you can point to?
Mm.
And that's what they go to. How old is your son? Or
Well, how old is he? Now he's 15, or he will be 15 in like a week.
mhm,
But at the time he was 11, so it was
mhm,
like maybe like sixth grade.
mhm, yeah,
So it didn't gel with what I learned in sixth grade. I'm like, are you really sure about that? Because that's like a fifth grade level of the Civil War. Like, you sure
right.
about that? So
Yeah, but also what they're teaching and also what they are I mean, what they are teaching is the level has dropped in terms of the amount of information kids are gaining as they go. You know what I mean?
exactly. Like my wife, and I'll probably close with this. My wife tells me I have a whole bunch of useless information in my brain, but it's useful when somebody needs it.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but this is all stuff I learned when I was a kid. She said, yeah, but you learned it. I'm like, well, okay. And all of a sudden, I don't feel so bad about being the world's biggest nerd.
Right.
I mean, look at the conversation we're having now. This would never have happened in another time or another household
Right.
because there's the support. My
Yeah.
wife lets me be the biggest geek in the world, and it's one of the things she loves about me. And that includes all the crazy information I picked up over the years.
Mhm.
But thank you for meeting with us tonight, Steph. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm sure
Thanks
we'll
for having
talk
me.
again soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I tell all my guests we're taping this tonight. It probably won't air until next Sunday.
Okay.
So it's like usually midnight on the YouTube platforms and anywhere that people find their podcasts.
Yeah.
So we will see you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
And in other Star Trek news, Skydance has made an offer for Paramount Global. The Star Trek franchise could be under no new ownership again. This after Time Warner expressed interest in purchasing the Star Trek franchise through Paramount. Also, XO6 has opened pre-orders for their next Star Trek: The Next Generation figurine of Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge. They're going to have a standard and an essential version. The essential version comes with the Type 2 phaser with holster, TR style tricorder, and a removable visor. The standard version comes with removable hands, a toolkit, and all the same things that the essentials comes with. More on this can be found at trekmovie.com and daily Star Trek News.com, respectively. And finally, this week, we saw Gary Graham, most notably known for Ambassador Soval on Star Trek Enterprise, had passed away this week. According to the post from his wife, he was surrounded by family, having passed away from cardiac arrest this week. The Jupiter Station crew send their condolences and hope Mrs. Graham knows that she and their family are in our thoughts. And that's going to be it from us this week. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. We'll be back next week with another guest. Stay tuned and keep watching. Have a great week, everybody. And in other Star Trek news, Skydance has made an offer for Paramount Global. The Star Trek franchise could be under new ownership again. This after Time Warner expressed interest in purchasing the Star Trek franchise through Paramount. Also, XO6 has open pre-orders for their next Star Trek: The Next Generation figurine of Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge. They're going to have a standard and an essential version. The essential version comes with the Type 2 phaser with holster, TR style tricorder, and a removable visor. The standard version comes with removable hands, a toolkit, and all the same things that the essentials comes with. More on this can be found at trekmovie.com and daily Star Trek News.com, respectively. And finally, this week, we saw Gary Graham, most notably known for Ambassador Soval on Star Trek Enterprise, had passed away this week. According to the post from his wife, he was surrounded by family, having passed away from cardiac arrest this week. The Jupiter Station crew send their condolences and hope Mrs. Graham knows that she and their family are in our thoughts. And that's going to be it from us this week. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. We'll be back next week with another guest. Stay tuned and keep watching. Have a great week, everybody.